Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We're about to jump into our Future of Esports panel, so take your seats, and we'll jump right into it. How many of you guys play competitive esports? Really? Come on. How many of you guys play Zelda? All right, at least we got some gamers out there. I love my Switch. I always call it the Shift instead of the Switch. I love my Switch. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about the future of esports for the next 45 minutes or so, how online video impacts competitive gaming. There will be time for questions in the end, and this time we'll make sure we get a mic out there to do it. And real quickly, my moderator is James Creech. He's the co-founder and CEO of Paladin Software. He put all this together, so a round of applause for him when he comes out. Justin Dellario is the director of esports programs at Twitch. Michal Blicharz, who's the vice president of pro gaming at ESL. Stan Press, managing director of digital and gaming for Magid Advisors. And finally, Steve Arhancet, CEO, Team Liquid. Come on out, let's spend some time talking about esports. Thank you. Go for it.
All right.
See, I got it right.
The waves keep on crashing on me for some reason.
All right. Thank you guys for coming out, hanging out late on a Friday. We're really excited. This is the premier esports panel that VidCon has ever offered. So we're really excited to get into the future of esports and how that is impacting online video. I'm here with a absolute who's who of esports, and so definitely the dumbest one up here. I'm going to let them do most of the talking, but Jim was nice enough to do quick intros. I thought I'd let them introduce themselves as well, and in fact, we have some cool content to show you along with that. So I'll kick things off and let Justin introduce himself.
Sure, I'm Justin Dellario. I'm the director of esports programs at Twitch. Twitch has quite a large amount of involvement with esports across the board, but for some reference, I was specifically involved with game creators and helping them reach esports content success on Twitch.
Well, hey guys, my name is Stan Press. I'm the managing director of digital gaming over at Magid Advisors. We're a long-standing market research and consultancy firm. Myself, I've been in esports for about 12 years. I'm a former competitive gamer. Used to play things like Battlefield 2 and 2142 back when we had to pay for our own flights and hotels for traveling to esports events. It wasn't even called esports back then. At that point, we're also lucky enough to win as much hardware, now cash, just to sell off and try to pay back for all those flights we had. But I always make the joke that I wish I was born 10 years later, just so I could have experienced esports as it is today. But as such, as a market research and consultant, I get to help and support the industry, work with a lot of these guys up here, and a lot of cool levels of just making sure that they're informed and know the audiences and can best support.
Hi, I'm Michal Blicharz. I work for ESL. I'm a VP of Pro Gaming. ESL is the largest esports company in the world. We've got offices around the world. We run online leagues, televised leagues, as well as events in the stadium. We are one of the largest esports broadcasters on Twitch. Just as an example, we did 500 million hours consumed on all our digital platforms last year.
And in fact, we have a quick little video to show some of the prominence of the ESL brand and the work that they do. So let's go ahead and roll that now.
To stand in the middle of it all, it's breathtaking, right? Welcome to the Internet Extreme Masters World Championship.
I'm telling you, the ESL, this Electronic Sports League, is going to get nothing but bigger.
Michael, you're famous. I love that you made it into the sizzle.
Thank you.
And Steve, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Is the mic on?
I don't know. Can we get some audio for Steve?
Hello?
All right, what's up, guys? My name's Steve Arhancet. I'm the co-CEO. Oh, there we go. Co-CEO for Team Liquid. Team Liquid is one of the largest esports teams in the world. We have 65 players. We do about 5 million monthly viewable minutes on Twitch. We're the third largest esports team content provider on the platform. And we are also one of the longest standing esports brands. We've been around for over a decade.
Awesome. And in case the ESL sizzle was enough, we got some really cool highlights from the Liquid world too. So let's go ahead and roll that clip.
What is Team Liquid? Team Liquid. A multi-team organization competing in StarCraft, Dota, Smash Brothers, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Heroes of the Storm, Halo, Hearthstone, and Street Fighter.
Liquid wins it. Oh my goodness, how does he do this? How does he go do it again? Liquid back in the game. Are you kidding me? Liquid!
Imagine there it is, GG! Team Liquid are going to the grand final.
Team Liquid, as they fight their way through an unreal comeback.
Racing, and that's the end of EVO 2016.
Team Liquid, writing the history of esports while fighting to make it in every league.
Awesome. And I'm your moderator for today, James Creech, co-founder and CEO of Paladin. We build enterprise software for digital media companies, powering a number of MCNs, broadcasters, and studios. So again, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for sharing those videos. I hope that gives you a taste of just the scope and the size of esports today. And wanted to start things off by talking a little bit about the audience. Who is consuming and watching esports content?
Well, what's fascinating about this space is that it's a lot of research we've shown that this year, when looking at and polling American audiences, we found that 49% of Americans at this point heard of esports. We're now at about 29% that have actually seen some kind of esports content this last year. Well, at that point, what is the definition of mass market? When are we going to hit that point? At this point, I'd say we're getting real close.
One of the things that we look at specifically at Twitch is where people are actually consuming the content. Right now on Twitch, 49% of esports is consumed via web, while 46% is being consumed via mobile, which is a significant margin close over the last couple of years, where 5% is still being consumed on consoles. But I expect that you'll continue to see over the next year plus that margin to close between mobile and web, and potentially mobile will overtake both.
So I would add to this that when we're talking about the audience, we always need to talk in terms of global. ESL reaches, the biggest events would reach viewers from about 160 to 180 countries. And it doesn't matter if it's a US event or not. I suppose it's very similar with Team Liquid, who probably have fans all over the world. I'm guessing dominant in North America, but in general, you would say your fan base is global as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a global fan base, and it varies by team. So we'll notice that some of our teams like Dota may be more European than North American, but fans of our Smashers or Street Fighter players are typically in North America. So viewership is across the board, and as Stan mentioned, it is growing, and as Justin mentioned, it is split between mobile and PC, and that's what we're seeing on the team side as well.
I also want to add that right now it's about a 73 to 27% split male to female, and 51% of it is aged between 18 to 34. So it does show you that it trends younger and more male, but we also are starting to see more women getting involved as viewers and competitors and spectators.
Very cool. How do you help brands think about this space and take advantage of reaching these audiences through esports content?
Yeah,
I'll
so
let you
for
guys go
Team,
first.
so for Team Liquid, we work with a number of brands. We have some major partners like Alienware, HTC. We just renewed our 6-year contract with Alienware. These brands are looking to use esports as a way of communicating their product or service and integrating with the millennial community in an authentic way, which is really hard to do right now because most millennials are just turned off to the blatant advertising and the click ads, and it's just noise to them. And so they use esports and athletes and team brands to do integrations on an emotional level. So some interesting things that they like is just content. They love doing content around our teams and players, behind the scenes, narratives, documentaries, features, things that are presented by that particular product and service. And so there's a lot of affinity to creating that kind of emotional connection between fans and the endorsement from athletes. A great example I like to use, if there's any tennis fans out there, you kind of rely on, if you were trying to buy a racket and you were going to say, who should I go? You might go and look at Djokovic or Serena and find out what racket they're using and then go buy the same one. And the same thing is in esports. Like, what PC is is Piglet using on a League of Legends team? And so we create content through endorsement as well of our athletes.
So I'd say that from my experience working with sponsors on the event side, this audience of millennials, it's strictly, their entertainment is strictly on demand and opt-in. So even if you're trying to serve advertising, they more often than not having ad block turned on and stuff like that. So definitely content marketing is something that is a powerful vessel for esports marketing overall. We worked with Intel for the last 11 years or 12 years almost as a company on projects like Intel Extreme Masters, and the way companies like to leverage our content and what we do is embedding themselves into content, but embedding themselves into content with a story. So on our end, if we are talking about Intel processors, we say all the PCs are using Intel technology that the pro gamers are playing on. If Steve has a laptop sponsor, most likely that sponsor will ask, we want your players to be visible on that content using our equipment and things like that. This is how we generally weave that story in. One story that we've created for the SSD group at Intel, for example, is whenever players come to our tournaments to compete, we give each and one of them an SSD drive, because a pro gamer typically takes up to 45 minutes to sit down, check the resolution, change the resolution, refresh rate, window settings, in-game settings, mouse drivers, everything. So it takes up to 45 minutes to be comfortable in a PC setup. And then if you're going from the warm-up area to the stage or something like that, doing that same process for 45 minutes just stops the show. So we embedded essentially the SSD from Intel as the centerpiece of that, where a player just pulls out the SSD, goes to the stage PC, slots in that SSD drive, plugs in mouse, keyboard, and everything, and is ready to go in 5 minutes. So sponsors typically in esports like that type of story.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think I'll just add one other quick thing is, in esports on the team side, which is atypical for other professional sports, is that teams actually for the large majority, own the likeness rights of our athletes. And so we're able to do really cool activations on behalf of like all 60 of our players. And just to incorporate how important broadcasting is, Twitch as a platform, as the predominant market leader in the space, they produce content from the athletes as well. So the analogy might be, what if Curry were to be in his driveway and set up a live streaming camera? How many people would actually tune in to watch him just play, in the driveway? And what if he were to play an ad? And what if he were to be drinking a beverage? And so we sell all of those activations and all of the kind of creative around what we can do with our athletes. And our partners and advertisers and sponsors are really excited about that space and interactivity with Twitch and Twitch chat.
So Justin, obviously some of the hardware companies and others are very interested in the space. How does Twitch think about working with non-endemic advertisers?
Twitch is working with quite a large amount of non-endemic advertisers on a regular basis. I think in all of gaming, we probably have the largest sales team, and we're not only selling traditional media or programmatic or marketplace ads across our platform, but we're also regularly selling custom solutions, CPI-based install products for mobile, esports sponsorships, influencer partnerships, and then esports league and content type deals as well. So when a brand like, for a good example would be Mobile One. Mobile One is a brand that recently signed a contract with Twitch to sponsor one of the esports leagues that we currently operate, which is the Rocket League Championship Series. Mobile One was not someone who came along and said, I want to sponsor the RLCS. Mobile One very much came to Twitch and said, I would like to reach this audience, and on top of reaching that audience, I would like the sentiment around our brand to be X, Y, and Z. And after working with our client strategists for some time, Mobile One became comfortable with the idea of getting involved with the Rocket League Championship Series, and they did. But another big non-endemic brand that's also sponsoring the Rocket League Championship Series is Brisk, who's sponsoring it in partnership with 7-Eleven. And that's a good example of a client who is not only placing their logo on the Rocket League Championship Series, but they're also going as far as to receive deliverables for custom influencer activations that are tied to the Rocket League Championship Series sponsorship. They are shooting custom commercial work, which we actually use one of Steve's companies to create. And going as far as to get involved directly with the pro players who are competing in the league by sponsoring on-site activations. And it really takes, it's a really holistic approach, but it really takes a really holistic and diverse inventory to be able to provide that to brands, and we're seeing a lot of success.
Very good. Now you've all kind of shared some interesting analogies to the traditional sports world, but there are obviously some significant differences as well. So one of those is that 95% of esports content is actually consumed via video rather than in-person live. How does that nuance affect how you work with brands or how you create content around esports?
Yeah, I mean, for Team Liquid, we, as you could see from the video, were at live events. We actually attended, in total, 278 events in 2016, which is significant, right, across all of our different teams and players. And but a lot of those, or every one of them, is broadcasted online. So we really rely on a digital footprint in order to have our message bleed through to our community. Distribution platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram, as well as our network of forums that we have through wikis and the TL network, we use these to communicate our message and to create engagement around whatever activation we choose to employ for a particular sponsor. And those are, that's the delivery system. That's the channel. That's where the community is. And another big one that just popped up over the last year is Discord. Discord is a platform where these communities are just growing, and there's conversation and buzz and traffic. And so we have to interject our message into those kind of streams of communication. And so we rely on the digital footprint in order to get the message across. There are some activations that we do at the event or in person, but they pale in comparison to the digital footprint.
Well, what's really cool about what's happening in the space right now is everything we're going to see with Overwatch League and hopefully maybe more with League of Legends in 2018 is just more regionalization. We're already seeing a little of that in League of Legends. They already hit 2 North American cities this year for LCS NA. I think it was Vegas and New York last year.
Yeah, so League of Legends does a great job of kind of traveling around North America in order to host the events, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's really cool because this opens more opportunities to create regional fans. At that point, we know how many people love local sports and how many people have those local jerseys, everything from high school to college to national level. We don't have that yet in esports, but this is the first few years we're going to start seeing more and more of that. More traveling events. Overwatch League is looking to have some kind of city franchise system. We don't know much about it yet, but we hopefully will soon. And this is going to create more and more live activations. More and more people are going to actually get used to watching these events in person than live, depending on where they live. Well, hey, if you live in LA and you can always go watch North American LCS whenever you want, yeah, you can do that every weekend instead of watching it on tablet or PC. But not everybody has that. Not everybody has that luxury.
I'd say that overall, it's even if you show up in person to an event, it's still video. It's not like you're watching a football pitch of some kind and people running around. You're still watching a screen. So it's important for us at live events to think about the audience. So if we're going to the West Coast, does the event start at 10 a.m. in the morning or maybe at 1 p.m.? That's a big decision based on where our audience is. That might be wanting to watch that content. So West Coast events for that reason start abnormally early.
That's why I usually miss the first part of it.
So, yep. So when we are on the West Coast, we want to start around 11. When we are in Europe, we want to start around 2 p.m. in Europe, so that New York has, a fighting chance to wake up early and tune in. So these are the things we have to take into account, but also things like how do we make it entertaining live in the stadium, and how do we make people think that it's worth it to lift up their butts, go somewhere, or even fly somewhere and watch the thing that they can watch on the 7-inch screen on the tablet or whatever, and watch it on a big screen with other people. So, but esports is predominantly video. Even if you show up in person, you're still going to be watching a video feed. And another important piece when it comes to video is that when Steve's players play, let's say Steve's a basketball team owner, we're going to go to a basketball game, and it's going to take us 5 minutes to figure out if one of his guys is crazy based on how he moves, how he reacts, what he does, and things like that. Whereas when his League of Legends team plays, the moment the game starts, practically all body language of those players is isolated, because their performance is expressed through digital characters. And it's very, very tough to just take a second and show one of his players freaking out, maybe in the replay. So video work, we have to put in tremendous amounts of work before and during the event, so that we create as many features and packages around the players as possible to project their personality, project their body language, because they don't have that vessel when they perform anymore.
Mm-hmm. And how are you measuring performance, especially around viewership and engagement for those streams?
For us, well, there are many, many metrics, and they change, and from different platforms they are defined slightly differently. It used to be sessions, so somebody sat down, clicked play, that was the key metric. Then it was unique viewers, but that's kind of odd between platforms as well, and not really apples to apples between different platforms. Today, for me, the most valuable metric is the total number of hours consumed. Because if I know, for example, that I play 1 Intel ad per hour, and somebody, overall the global audience consumed 100 million hours of my content, I can reasonably assume that I served 100 million ads to people globally. So that to me is a good metric, especially that events differ between multiple days. Then you're going to accumulate more sessions and things like that, so or more unique viewers. So those stats are kind of misleading. For me, the best stat in terms of metrics is the hours consumed.
Yeah, I mean, time is the ultimate currency, right? What are people choosing to do? Are they watching your tournament? Are they watching, another sporting event or other entertainment choice?
So, for example, on Facebook right now, we stream on multiple platforms for some events. On Facebook, the engagement is very, very short, but to a very large number of unique viewers. So, is that really good? And is it likely that over very short engagement periods, our sponsors were visible to those people, and were those people really paying attention? The numbers are glamorous in terms of unique people, but in terms of engagement, it's not there yet. So hours consumed for me is definitely, for the umpteenth time, the best stat.
Yeah, Justin, how do you think about that from the platform perspective?
To add to what Michael was saying, at Twitch, actually, we primarily also look at whether you want to call it hours watched, or we go by minutes watched, same difference. But we're constantly doing case studies to try and determine, however, what additional audience skews and how they perform and watch mean over time. I mean, a good example is since most big esports moments happen on Twitch, the general consumer audience will regularly talk about the peak concurrent users they saw in any esports stream and talk about that as if it's the metric for performance for that content. Like, wow, I saw this new and upcoming game reach into the hundreds of thousands of audience. That's just, I guess this is an esport now, or this is really coming along. However, there's a lot of games whose esports content tell us quite a different story, because there are some developers who've also created really engaged audience who is super loyal to the content and will watch every moment of esports for that game. And users in that game might have like an hour minutes watch, like an average of an hour spent on channel every time they watch, which is in some ways potentially more valuable to advertisers because they're consistent and they're loyal, and they're maybe likely to grow affinity for brands that are being advertised across that product. So there's, while we do generally think of minutes watched, and the consumer audience is most of the time enamored by total peak concurrent users, there are a lot of other viewership stories than both of those alone.
Well, this is also what I really want to talk about is we see the differences in how these are tracked. Even just a difference from minutes to watch, you tell that to a brand is going to have what could be a completely different conversation. But the fact is that there is not a lot of alignment from any of the teams, leagues, or platforms on what that data looks like. Because you talk to a traditional brand agency who's interested and open to talking about esports, but you give them this data that is endemic to esports. Well, they're not going to understand it. They'll understand TV data. They'll understand radio. They'll understand news. That's what makes sense to them. So right now, in terms of just how we translate this, where do we meet in the middle? How do we meet in the middle? These are the big questions that we're helping to try to figure out.
So now that we've talked a little bit about the audience and the viewership and measurement, let's talk about the economics. How do we make money out of esports?
Let's be awkward and quiet for another 30 seconds.
I mean, I think we all started talking about advertising already by talking about the way that brands are engaging via the online video that esports produces. So first and foremost, sponsorships and advertising. But I think that it's a lot of other monetary channels in esports that aren't quite as developed. And that's not to say that sponsorships and advertising is developed either. There's a long way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, because we look at traditional sports as a good example where they found many different layers to find money from. At that point, advertising, local advertising, national sponsors, broadcast rights, merchandising, these really don't happen in esports just yet. Or at least if they do, they're on very different scales. At that point, merchandising could be a massive source of revenue for traditional sports, but in esports, it's still only 5, 10, 20% for some certain teams, and less so the platforms per se. The leagues have a merchandising strategy. The teams have a merchandising strategy. You guys have your own merch as a platform, but not say around esports. So at that point, how do we figure this out? I also look at digital goods. When I say digital goods, I mean DLC. I mean buying a skin of your favorite team on it. We've only seen a little bit of that actually come through in a consistent way. And surprisingly, it's not from some of the biggest competitive titles yet. So I want to see more of that. I want to see the ability to buy an esports crate, skin, gun, you name it, every single game that I play.
And Steve, from a team standpoint, when you think about 360-degree representation of these athletes, how do you think about monetization opportunities?
You know, monetization in esports is kind of it's a big question. It depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. The largest amount of revenue is generated by the developers and the amount of skins and in-game items that are sold. And for the last decade, before June 1st really, of this year, developers have held that revenue and not really shared it with team owners or tournament organizers, and they've retained all of that, and it's been, you know, like a marketing cost in order to run the league. However, on June 1st, the LCS announced that they would introduce a franchise for their game. This is like the most monumentous event ever in esports history for teams, because as a team owner, to get to your question, we have survived from a revenue perspective based on the partnerships and sponsorships that we have with, you know, Alienware and HTC and various others, and HyperX. But now we will actually share in a percentage basis with the amount of revenue that's driven from the leagues that we participate in. Just like the Golden State Warriors gets a check from the NBA, or the Capitals gets a check from the NHL. Now Team Liquid will get a check from being part of the LCS. That's just insane. Like, I never thought that would happen. So it's happening, and it's been announced. And so a majority of our revenue in the future will be from the leagues that we participate in. And second to that will be advertisers and partners. And right now, because we own the likeness rights of all of our athletes and the representation of that, as far as that continues, we'll also generate revenue from there. Secondary to that, we do merchandising, hats, hoodies, jackets like this, and in-game items. But those are kind of secondary to those primary revenue drivers.
I was waiting for a store plug or something.
Yeah, this jacket is nice.
I was going to say we can buy all their same shirts that the four of us all for some reason
That's right.
too. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just to give everybody a sense of perspective, the International Dota Tournament in Seattle, organized by Valve Software, the producer and publisher of Dota 2, is supported by the community. You can, in order to support, you buy a $10 in-game item. $2.50 goes to the prize money, and $7.50 Valve pockets. They've managed to raise about $20 million last year in increments of $2.50, and the same amount, triple, goes into Valve's pockets. So there is a very, very powerful way for publishers to monetize esports. For companies like ESL, like Team Liquid, it is not as easy because there is no, the tie directly to the audience isn't as strong. And historically, the reason esports leagues have had, until a couple of years ago, it was actually a battle for survival. So when I started working at ESL, Intel Extreme Masters events were happening, in a corner of a Comic-Con. There was a little booth with not even a stage. Then we added a stage at some point. Then we had to take up more floor space. And then suddenly we had to, rent out a stadium. And now next to a stadium, we have an expo, where we flipped. Next to an esports major event, there is an expo. That's a good source of revenue for us. Something that Steve has mentioned, which is a revenue share from the league. ESL is doing that as well with the Esl Pro League for Counter-Strike. Obviously, it's also shifted to a large degree these days where event organizers are now flying in all the participants. It didn't used to be like that, simply because there wasn't money for it. So, but that's changing as well. Now Steve has players who are super attractive to our audiences. We now are relying on a revenue to, attract 10,000 people to buy tickets, and we need Team Liquid to be a partner. So things are definitely moving in the direction that Steve really likes. But that's because for everybody there is more money in the ecosystem, because we're at that tipping point where it's not about survival anymore, it's now about optimization of that monetization process.
Yeah. So you mentioned the tipping point and the explosive growth that we've seen in the esports space, especially around the opportunity to monetize. And so with that, we've seen an influx of venture capital, traditional sports teams and leagues investing in teams or getting involved in the esports world. What does that look like going forward? What is the future of outside involvement or some of these traditional sports players getting more involved in the esports world?
we've seen a lot of that already, actually. We've had Delaware North looking at Splice. Steve, you could probably talk a bit about yours after I go through a couple examples. Let's see. Cloud9 raised a bunch from a lot of different sources. Then
Mortals recently
took from AEG, right? So we're seeing a lot of investments coming from a lot of different parties, because in order for a lot of these big organizations who do have a League of Legends and a Overwatch team, if they want to play in those up-and-coming experiences, they're going to have to raise a lot of money, some of it very quickly, to be able to justify entry. At that point, the whole point of a franchise is that you buy your spot. Preferred partnership or franchise, whatever you call it, a lot of that money is going to have to come from somewhere. But a lot of these companies are realizing that this is potentially a good investment. This could yield returns, maybe not in a couple years, but maybe 10, 20, 30 years. There's also a little bit of FOMO if you're looking at it from that perspective, like, oh, hey, he did it, so I got to do it now. Like, that happens a lot, but that's okay because, hey, we're getting the investments. I'm very happy with that. But Steve, I'd love to hear about
Yeah.
what you went through.
Yeah, so Team Liquid in July of 2016, we partnered with Peter Guber, who's one of the owners for the Golden State Warriors, Ted Leonsis, Wizards Capitals, and most recently added to that group was Jeffrey Vinnick, Tampa Bay Lightning. And one of the reasons why we did this is because we have been very foot to mouth, like rough and tough esports organization over the last decade. Victor and I never really took a loan. We relied on our partners in order to do what we've built in the community and all of the engagement around our fan base, which is very rabid and it's big and it's worldwide. But now we face the entry to all of these franchises. And these franchises, it's not like you get in for free. You got to pay a franchise fee. And so for League of Legends, that's been discussed at 10 million. Overwatch is, going to be similar, if not more. And in addition to that, you need to make sure that you're investing into the infrastructure, to the development of players, so that you can recruit the best talent, and then you can maintain competitiveness across all of your different esports. Well, that has a price tag too, right? Like we just signed a 10,000 square foot training facility. It's in Santa Monica, right next to Riot Game Studios. That was a big deposit check. And we also have to house all of these 60 gamers. Well, that's a lot of living space. And so in order for us to maintain our position as one of the elite best esports organizations in the world, we need a lot of money in order to do that. And so we partnered with people that have access to it. And then we also want to find the right partners, people that are great to work with. And whether they provide media support, distribution, access to venues, they have a lot of resources in a specific geography that may be where we want to be heading in esports in the future. So we factor in these kind of strategic partnerships and the value associated with them in pairing to the capital infusion that's necessary in order for us to maintain our position and accomplish the things that we want to do as TL.
So we mentioned quite a few teams, but just to make sure that we cover some of the other places that VCs haven't seen spending money recently, some of the other popular areas you'll see money spent are on technology-based startups. A lot of young and ambitious engineers out there are trying to unlock a lot of what they identify as potential problems in the esports space going forward, whether it's like true identity, competition systems, utilization of like block and chain type technology for the eventual, or what a lot of people believe will be an eventual space where wagering exists across all esports, and other types of gambling endeavors.
That we've seen a lot of coaching apps.
Yeah.
At that point, you have all these tools and a lot of people who want to get competitive, even if it's just to be better than their friends, which is a big motivator for a lot of people who play multiplayer games. They don't need to be the best, but they just want to beat their friends. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So we're seeing a lot of apps, tools, websites, coaching systems where you could actually be one-on-one with a pro gamer and pay a reasonable fee for it just to get an hour. At that point, you spend that kind of same amount of money doing a private lesson for a language. If you want a private lesson on how to be better at Overwatch or League or Counter-Strike, you can do that. But we're also seeing content platforms coming up where they're bringing in all these pro gamers from all these teams, just creating guides upon guides, videos, strategies, everything that a pro uses to help the fans, the viewers, the everyday Counter-Strike player be the best they can be. That's what I get excited about.
Let's talk a little bit more about that player experience. I mean, you touched on how hard your athletes train, and we've got a couple former pros on the stage. What was it like when you were competing at that level?
Yeah, so I used to be a player, maybe not a great one, but I was one. And, back then there was really no structure. I mean, you just played the hell out of a game and, you were pretty good at it and hopefully got to the top of the leaderboard and you played on teams. It's very different now. The experience as a professional player, the standard is to have a coach, an assistant coach, you have a chef, you have a sports psychologist or mental coach, we also are partnered with a doctor from the Mayo Clinic that does like physiological testing on the guys and eye tracking and cognitive function and visualization and looking at optimizing all of these things for athletes. I mean, it's just everything that you would expect from other professional sports that has now become the standard in esports development for athletes. And the reason for that is because athletes aren't getting paid like a couple $1,000 a month anymore. They have substantial salaries, they're employees, they have benefits, they have all of their living covered for them, and we are doing everything we possibly can to develop them as better athletes than when they came into Team Liquid. And so, and that is now competitive because other organizations that have also taken investment and have great partners are trying to do the same thing. And it's kind of that war for the best talent and putting together the best roster. So that has created a very healthy ecosystem that players can now participate in various different games. And from Team Liquid's perspective, you know, our investment into a particular game varies based on the you know, how big the game is, the notoriety with a particular game. So let's say, for example, PUBG. All right, PUBG is a brand new game, and the esports component, we don't know what's going to happen with it yet. So our investment will kind of pair with the viewership associated with it. You know, like a League of Legends is obviously way up there versus in Rocket League started small and has been growing over time. So we kind of decide how many resources we want to provide associated with the prevalence of the game.
No, it's crazy that you talk about all these things because you're right that a lot of the talent of these players, there is a ceiling. But at that point, now you're fighting for any incremental benefit you can possibly get, whether it's eye tracking, visual acuity, having a right diet, sound body means a sound mind. These things are what's going to really help every pro get to the absolute best, and one team's going to have those players that just edge out just over the other team just a little bit better. It's going to be one bad day of having too much coffee the night before and you slept poorly and you mess up a whole game. Like, that's how competitive League of Legends and Counter-Strike is right now.
So before we take some audience questions, let's close out with a few rapid-fire questions for you guys. Number one, I want to hear, just go down the line quick, 30 seconds, what each of you are playing these days.
Currently, I'm playing a lot of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. If I'm not playing that, I'm playing Clash Royale or Rocket League.
Nice.
Overwatch competitive on PC and a lot of PUBG.
Blood Bowl 2 on PC, number 10 on the open ladder in the world.
There we go.
Nice. I've been playing League of Legends, PUBG, and Clash Royale, and actually Mobile Legends on my phone.
I was going to say, we're going to have to play PUBG after this one.
I guess so, right?
Yeah.
And what do you guys see coming next? What is the future of esports if you had to make one or two quick predictions?
For me, the future of esports, I can't really make any predictions game-wise. That's really tough in a short time. However, I think that some of the things we discussed today, like monetization is more figured out, it's more predictable, direct and indirect is more defined, and I think that spending will increase from the outside, as it has been on a regular course over the last several years, and I think we'll continue to see more and more stability for teams' involvement in leagues. That's why most of what we covered today was a pretty good snapshot.
No, definitely. What we definitely see on the research side is we need to start looking at a shift of live content, especially on digital, is not the only thing people watch when it comes to esports. It's highlights. We see almost just as many hours watching live content as we see in highlights. At that point, you have all this content that's not being monetized as much, or not being branded or sold into, or leveraged. So that's something that I get really excited about, is seeing live and like digital live and digital highlights being looked at from the brands, teams, leagues, and platforms.
I'd say there's a good reason those guys are not talking about, you know, the next 10 years, because that's technology. Esports will move with the development of technology, which is very hard to predict overall, but I'd say a bubble is coming up. I mean, there's so much money in the space these days. Everybody's trying. Everybody's thinking, I'll blow those $2 million if that gets me ahead a little bit. If they're wrong, that's, you know, contributes to the bubble. So there's some kind of bubble imminent. I don't think it's going to be as bad as the previous esports bubble a few years ago, but I'm expecting a bubble of some kind.
From the team perspective, I would say right now there's probably 50 semi-relevant esports team brands within the space. Over the next 5 years, that will probably get narrowed down by a fourth or so. I think that will also cause a lot of the advertising and sponsorship revenue for specifically teams to also kind of be funneled into those handful of organizations that succeed through this phase of growth.
And if you were starting a business in the world of online gaming today, what would you do?
Online gaming or esports?
Esports, anything related to gaming.
I'd be a pro player.
Okay.
Because you're self-serve business at that point.
Sure.
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's like 10 years ago. Like, I wish I was born 10 years later. I would love to be a pro.
I'd probably fail as a pro and do what Steve does.
I mean, I love what I do, but I would love to play again if I was good.
Looks like you already did that. You already failed and became a
Yeah.
Popular choice, huh? Everyone wants to go pro. Wants to practice after this.
fun.
Well, great. Well, again, thank you guys for sharing so much insight. I want to open it up to the audience now. If anyone has questions, we're going to run a mic around. So please raise your hand and we'll bring it out to you.
Hey, just wondering what your guys' thoughts are on Mixer. Obviously, it's like making a lot of noise right at the moment. Do you guys think that there's going to be a shift, especially obviously Twitch? I don't know. Are you guys thinking about that, or are you kind of like,
I think that Mixer has some really cool product features. I'm interested to see how they grow over time or don't grow.
Yeah, like I think there's some cool stuff going on there. I think it's a new avenue for up-and-coming streamers who want to start streaming. They might see all these other platforms as really congested. It's like, oh, where do I even begin? How do I grow big there? Mixer might give them a new avenue. I don't know if I like the name that much. Going from Beam to Mixer, I understand there were probably some reasons why they had to change it from legal reasons, but that's probably my only concern.
I'll be frank and I'll say I'm not too familiar with it.
Yeah, I've never heard of Mixer either.
Well, that actually gives a good answer right there.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I was just wondering, a lot of the reason why people don't watch esports is because they don't really understand what's going on in the game. What are some ideas that you guys have to try to get the casual audience more into esports? Because you need to know like what each character does, or you know how the Counter-Strike map works. What are your guys' ideas of like integrating the casual audience more into esports? Thank you.
When it comes to the success of the content and actually engaging that audience who maybe has a taller or tougher barrier to entry, we're constantly talking about this at Twitch, whether it's, but there's definitely no solid answer right now. There's a lot of ideas out there, whether it's standing up streams where the commentators are specifically purposed to break the game down at a lower level and really be inviting of new audience, all the way up to how you think about the narrative of the upcoming event that this high barrier to entry person might watch, and how far out from the event they start being fed information about it, so that they come in already understanding a certain level of detail. And if they have that level of knowledge, are they then easier to stick? Separate of thinking about what content is tough, I think alternatively, a solution is create games that have a low barrier to entry to understand. I'm not knocking League of Legends or Dota or any game like that at all, because I love those games. But in the last year and a half, something I was directly involved with was like creating Rocket League's esports community. And I think this game is proving week after week right now in every big event that there's really something to be said for a game that somebody could tune in and watch, and it'll only take about 30 seconds to really understand what's going on. It's cars playing soccer. And that, I think audience is sticking to that really easy concept to understand.
I definitely want to add to that, and I love the fact that you mentioned RLCS or Rocket League. It is basically things that Americans love, cars and kicking something into a goal. But when you look at trying to improve the spectator experience, you did highlight the education aspect. We need to figure out how to teach people about who these characters are. But we also need to create affinity. By creating affinity, we look at both how do we get, well, why do we play these games? Because we've been playing them forever. We get them into when we're young. At that point, League of Legends has been around since 2009. And that's, what, 8 years now? Then we're looking at Counter-Strike, hit 18 years. Dota has been around for, in terms of whatever form of mod, since 2003, 2001? I'm looking at the people who probably know that better. It's all right. But the point is that we've created affinity because we've been playing these games for so long. So the longer that these games are around, the more that we get into these through our youth, that education will come, that affinity will build.
Do you think those games have staying power, or are we going to see, an evolution and a new kind of series of titles come up?
Well, they've kept my interest a lot longer than other things have. If you're looking at 18 years for CSGO, 8 years for League of Legends, we still talk about them to this day. We never thought we would imagine that even 5, 10 years ago for each of those games, we'd still be talking about them.
Yeah.
I think what allows them to last too is if you look at both Dota 2 and League of Legends, side-by-side photographs, maybe 5 years ago the game and the game today, they look extremely different. Graphics engines are being updated, gameplay is being updated, and there's constant changes to the actual fine-tuning of the game that allows the players to feel like they're experiencing something new. I think several years ago I might have said, I wonder what's going to replace these games, but I have a lot of confidence that games have figured out lasting power more recently.
Well, and it seems like the major game publishers, especially Riot and Blizzard, have realized, you know, the impact of esports and are designing games to create a great visual experience for viewers as well.
Yeah. Well, with accessible viewers, you look at Overwatch, there's no blood. It didn't say you killed anyone, easily eliminated someone. That immediately opens it up to many more sponsors and a lot more activities can be built around it.
I think overall, to come back to your point, there is a space in video games for complex games that cannot be explained. Dota 2 cannot be explained. I don't care what kind of noob stream you're going to do. Cannot be explained. And that's okay. I'm going to go to a baseball game. I'm not going to understand it. And not a lot's being done for me to understand the game. But I go with Steve. He's going to sit next to me. He's going to say, he's going to have to do this. This is why he's doing that. Oh, this is why this is amazing. That's how people learn to share the experience. That's how viewership grows. You sit down next to a guy and say, Faker is amazing because of A, B, C, and D. Nobody that's generally kind of, oh, I'm interested in esports. Why don't I look up this gigantic YouTube channel with hours and hours of content to help me understand? That's not how it happens in real life in sports. That's not how, you know, if I'm into judo and I want to get Steve into watching judo or whatever, I'm going to explain stuff to him like friend to friend. Steve's never going to take the time to watch tutorials online or anything. I think that's the wrong area to focus. I don't think baseball needs to be explained or dumbed down for Europeans. And I don't think necessarily that the complicated esports games have to be explained or dumbed down. Frankly speaking, I don't think a game like League of Legends has fully tapped into all of its potential within its own player base, let alone from outsiders. So I wouldn't really focus on that much. Of course, there's things to be done, but it's not a real problem, I think.
Yeah. I'll just add one last thing, which is, from my perspective, one of the most capturing moments for a casual fan to get into esports are the displays of excellence. And that's, you know, paralleled like a half-court shot or a Hail Mary at the very end of a game, or, you know, the last-second shot that you get to win the NBA Finals. You know, and in League of Legends, it's like the Phoenix Quadra kill, or, you know, Faker getting a pentakill in a crucial fight. And these things kind of like percolate to the top, and casual fans are able to see, wow, someone can play this game at this level. This is insane, right? Like, I can't believe this is happening. And that awe and that, you know, appreciation, it's almost like if I were to go to a symphony and listen, or if I was going to listen to somebody play the piano. And I don't follow basketball at all, but I went to a basketball game and I was like, who is that guy that's just like, he was almost dancing around on the court. He looks amazing. They're like, oh, that's Curry. I was like, oh, okay. You know, so
I've heard of him.
you kind of come to the sport because of how well it's being played, and then you develop affinities for particular players that are doing those things, and that human interest then leads to the team. And so it's the responsibility of the developer to really highlight those moments of excellence. And that's where I feel like, at least to get to your question, like, how do you get the casual fan involved in esports? I think you start there.
Damn, James, you should have asked that question earlier.
That was awesome, yeah. Thank you. Keep them coming. For a couple more.
I would argue that esports has been built on the blood, sweat, and tears of the community, and a lot of that has been grassroots and especially volunteer-driven. So my question is, with the growing influx of capital, do you think that it's going to trickle down and make it easier for smaller organizations to grow, or do you think it's going to end up going to the top and being winner-take-all?
I won't lie, that's a good question. And it's going to be really tough to answer that, because we haven't really seen many precedents before. If you look at traditional sports, we could maybe look at everything from the last 100 years, but is that a good comparison? At that point, I do see a lot of need for talent, maybe not at a grassroots level, but we need good people across every vertical who understand esports. You have no idea how hard it is to find an accountant who gets esports.
Yeah.
You have no idea how to find a medical professional that is actually eager to understand esports rather than just to take a paycheck that you need their help. We need more subject matter experts who care about esports, who could fit that goal. So whether there's going to be a place for everybody, I always think there will be. And there will be places you can get in the smaller level. There'll be smaller games. There'll be smaller communities. You can always get started somewhere. The fact is that this is an industry built off of passion, and I don't think that'll ever, ever go away.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. It depends on where you get into esports. You know, PUBG is a great example. You know, there's a small studio in Korea that just now is the second highest viewership on Twitch, I think, consistently over the last 4 months. So, you know, you can hit it big as a new studio, or, you know, it may be tougher as a new team to develop a fan base, but it kind of depends on where you start. There's so many different areas within esports that you can get involved in. So
we just made the perfect point that no one expected a PUBG. Well, you're not going to see that in traditional sports. Maybe the most exciting that happened was UFC, but beyond that, how many different games would come out and just create this amazing new space and amazing new communities.
Yeah, I'm cutting you off.
Oh, that's
You're
all
done.
the time we have.
I saw that look. You're done.
That's
You're done.
okay.
Thank you guys. Round of applause
Thank you
for this
guys
great
so
battle
much.
on esports. Thank you guys.